Me and my friends were having a discussion last weekend about the reasons of happiness and unhappiness. And when we were talking about unhappiness, we suddenly started talking about community. Now, I'm an avid believer that individualism is the reason for the loss of community, mostly in Western Europe. Some of them disagreed with me, some of them were like, no, I don't think that's the case. We can make an argument for individualism and innovation leading to a better life, and people might not need people anymore, and self-sufficiency and whatever have you. But I thought maybe it would be nice to do the research and see what the research says. And I can already give you a spoiler: the research is mixed, because that is the answer to almost everything that happens in the world around us. Today I want to discuss a little bit about what is the sense of community, where it comes from, what is happening in Europe with the rise of individualism that has happened in the last few centuries. I want to talk about the contrasts with the East and the West, hoping that we can take the good parts of both societies and see if we can come to a good middle ground. I also want to talk about volunteerism, which is this concept of volunteering that people do while they go abroad into different places, difficult places where life is very hard for the local people, and go and help them to feel a sense of achievement or a sense of altruism. But the reality is you can do that in your own community as well if you choose to. So these are certain topics that we're going to be discussing. We're going to be citing all the sources so that everything is available for you to make your own decision. But for now, let's start with chapter number 1. Now let's talk about the evolutionary need for community. This is quite obvious. We were raised, or we were evolved to be actually part of communities. Simple as that, because it was good for our survival. At the end of the day, the whole point of humans was to propagate our species, to make more offspring and hope they can survive to a reproductive age. And what helps with that? If you have more people around you helping you raise other people. Because you might get disabled, something happens when you go hunt for food, you would want to be in a place where you know that your offspring will be taken care of. So community was always integral into our society, into our system, into our way of life. Now, the problem actually happens when we try to think that we can live without society and without community. Back in the hunter-gatherers time, it was actually quite impossible to do anything alone because the world was such a dangerous place. So we were more geared towards having a community. That doesn't mean that people did not choose communities. Those people just not able to put their genes forward, because that's how evolution works. It's self-selection. So those who were trying to stay without communities died out, and those who stayed in communities protected themselves, and the others were able to propagate their species forward and getting to our stage where we still have this intrinsic need for community, evolutionarily speaking. But we don't know if that is actually true. That's what we're going to find out. In this chapter, I just wanted to make sure that we can make it clear that biologically and evolutionarily, community is a need. Do we still need it in this day and age? That's a different thing. But we have realized that our culture and our technology has evolved much faster than actually our brains. So our brains might still need it, but our systems and our culture might not. So on the topic of individualism, the only book I can recommend that will make everything so easy is The Weirdest People on the Planet, which is a book about how Europeans, or mostly white people, became the dominant force of human civilization in general. What they mention is actually the whole story comes from the Western Church. Whether you believe it or not, that's a separate debate. This is just opinions of other people. Harvard psychologist Steven Pinker actually mentioned once that the idea of a family and kin-based relationships is dangerous to other ideas. So nationalism, religion, and anything else that requires loyalty to a certain idea will always be competing against the idea of family, because you would always trust your people, your kin, more than you would trust random people, even if you share the same country or same religion. So they actively try to rip apart the family structure so that your loyalty only lies with them. Now, whether it's true or not is something else, but you can see that really play really well in nationalism and religion and everything else. So the church, the Christian church, specifically the Catholic Church, tried its best to rip apart the family system. They have forbade any kind of kin-based relationships in terms of marriage. You're not even allowed to marry your 8th cousin. Now, what are the consequences of that? Well, before that, you used to marry your cousins or your neighbor tribes, and there would be a lot of things going on between other people, so you're connected to each other. But when you're not allowed to marry your cousins or your cousins' cousins till the 8th apart, you have to go out of your own tribe and your own social circle to go find a mate or a partner. So this makes sense why suddenly you had these impersonal trust coming up, because now the only people you could trust before this time was your family. But now that is being ripped apart because now the eligible people have to move out of their social circles in order to find a mate and a partner. So they go to different cities, different tribes, different towns and try to settle there. And that will only work if you trust the other person who's suddenly coming into your city that, oh, they mean well. And they tried to make religion that overarching theme that, hey, look, as long as you're Christian, we can trust you. And that led to this impersonal trust of sort that made it very easy for Europeans to move and diffuse into the whole continent without having to worry about isolation. Because now it's not just skins who are going to like you, but also normal people who you share an identity with, such as religion or a nation. The problem arises when you take this impersonal trust and you scale it and you accelerate it. So now this led to a marketplace where you can start trusting people out of nowhere. And it was okay because you were like, hey, as long as we are Christians, as long as we are Europeans, as long as we are the same nation, whatever have you, we can trust each other and we can build this marketplace. And then they ran away with all of that innovation, which is great. That is what led to us having this technology through which I'm talking to you. So science and innovation, all of that was perfect. The problem with that was this rise of innovation and individualism led to the loss of communities. So kin-based families were being ripped apart for nuclear-based families, families of just mother, father, and children. No more extended families needed because maybe religion is there, maybe your nation is there, so you don't need anything else. Fast forward to now, people don't think even nuclear family is needed. Now it's more like I am self-sufficient. I'm a person who can hold down a job, who can buy their own house without any support because the government, an impersonal thing like a government or a bank, can provide me a loan instead of a family to buy a house, provides me security of a job and retirement so I don't need to rely on my children. They provide me with everything so I don't need family anymore. And that's my belief, that I think loneliness and everything is coming up in these countries because of individualism. And that's what we're going to discuss in the next chapter, chapter 3. Consequences of loneliness. So far we talked about the evolutionary need for community. We talked about how communal bonds are broken in Europe thanks to individualism and the Western Church, the Catholic Church. Now we're going to talk about a little bit of why I think that's a problem. I think that's a problem because community is needed for us to survive. Western communities don't really have many problems, so why does AHA think that there might be some problems? Well, if you look at it, loneliness is a problem. Mental health issues are a problem, and populism is also a problem, which is a topic for another video. So I assume maybe if you look at the data, there might be something that points towards loneliness being a thing and communal bonds being a thing. I looked at some surveys, and I'll be honest with you, I still don't know. You have some surveys like the EU National Survey on Loneliness, which talks about how much people feel how much lonely. And in that, the information wasn't that amazing. It just said that, yeah, okay, 20% of the survey respondents feel lonely in the last week, but it doesn't tell you why much. Then I tried to look at the other one, which was Gallup Happiness Report, and that doesn't talk about loneliness or anything. It just talks about happiness, and Northern Europe always comes on top because it's structured towards well-being and stuff around you, systems, not really how you feel and what's the reason. Although it does say that 23% of people who responded to the survey felt lonely yesterday, and out of which 54% also reported feeling sad, which was across the board. So maybe it's a thing that is happening all over the world. But the last one I looked at was Sapien Labs, which is running this for the 4th time. And they actually had an interesting result. They did not have any European countries in the top 10, I think. They mostly had Asian, African, and Latin American countries on top. And they were measuring mental health quotient. So it was all about your sense of self and your drive and everything like that. So not just if you feel lonely or not. And they attributed this mental health quotient being weak in European or internet-enabled economies because of 3 things: social media usage and technology, bad food diet, ultra-processed food, and of course, destroying of family bonds. So this could be me cherry-picking the data because I looked at 3 different surveys. All 3 of them will give me different results, and I don't know what to believe. But my problem is that the thing that I was looking for is only being answered in the 3rd one, not in the first 2. First was just about loneliness in general, and you can't really do much with that information. So I'll leave that to you to decide. I'll put it down for you to check these sources out and make your own decision. But this was just my thought process that I wanted to explain. Now let's talk about community. Let's talk about how I think community could be the answer and why I think there's something going wrong. Because if you've ever heard of the term voluntourism, voluntourism is this concept in developed countries where people who are altruistic and want to do something really, instead of doing something in their community, go across the world or go to some remote area and try to do something there and feel really good about themselves. So there is this innate need to do service, even in developed countries. but they have this false sense of surety that there's nothing going wrong in their neighborhoods. And I think that's the problem. The problem is people believe locally that, hey, why would Europeans need help? We have everything. We have money, we have running water, we have electricity, we have gas, we have everything we need. But that's not true. Or else there won't be people having loneliness, having mental health issues, having so many problems within Europe. So there is more to this. And volunteerism only shows you that people within these countries also want to provide and to be of service. It's just that they have a system that they're working in which they don't really feel connected to the people around them to actually provide the service. And I think for that, we should look at the East to learn a little bit more about society and service. Japan is a very good example of a society that works so well together. It has its toxicities as well. People have a lot of suicides and disappearances in those kind of countries as well because they're too worried about the burden that they will put on their families and the pressure of society. So we can't take what we think is good and apply it on the other side. We don't need to take everything, right? And that's, I think, the crux of what I really want to talk about. If you look at countries like India, Pakistan, where I am from, Japan, South Korea, you see that familial bonds and culture really plays a role there. Community really plays a role there and really helps people cope with everything that they're doing. Their bad working hours and everything is all fair because you have family and support systems there. Here, everything is good. Working hours are great. Everything is nice. But there is this longing, this void that people are trying to fill themselves by doing volunteering and everything across the world instead of doing it in your neighborhood. And I think we need to really reframe that, make it more understandable from the government and everyone that, hey, you do need community. Although we have created this false sense of not needing community and self-sufficiency, that, hey, the government provides you retirement, the government provides you healthcare, the government provides you everything, so you might not need people around you, but you always do. And that is what I really think is important, that you need to build your own community. And if you think family is not the right answer, because in that survey in Sapien Labs, around 23 to 40% of young adults believe that they did not align with any of their family members. So if family is not the one that you can go for now, at least build a community where you do compromise and you do think about others. Maybe your neighborhood is a good start. So what I want to leave you with is an exercise that I hope you do and try it out, which is just knock on your neighbor's door if you have never done it before. Make them food if you've never done it before. Go on a walk with them if you've never done it before. Do something in your neighborhood that you've never done before that involves other people and see how you feel about it. And I can bet good money that I think you will feel happier afterwards. It might be uncomfortable at first because it is a muscle that is ingrained into you. It's a system that is ingrained into you, that you have to be individualistic, that you have to just think about yourself, that you don't really need to worry about other people. A good friend of mine from the philosophy circle was once mentioning this to me, that I just don't know. I would never think of making food for other people. And that to me sounds weird because I was always thinking of making food for other people. So train that muscle. Learn to train that muscle. Learn to be of service of other people. Don't go across the world to find purpose and meaning. Find it in your own neighborhood. Thank you so much for listening. I'll talk to you next time.